Small businesses in the U.S., you often hear them called the lifeline of our economy.
And it's true, for good reason.
Right. I mean, beyond just the shops on Main Street, they create a huge number of jobs. And the Small Business Administration, the SBA, has historically been, well, central to supporting them.
Absolutely. Think loans, training, and maybe most critically, disaster relief. That kind of backing.
It's been a real cornerstone for entrepreneurs, hasn't it? Helping them take risks, innovate, basically fueling the whole economic engine.
Exactly.
Which is why, recent news about some pretty significant shifts, cuts really at the SBA has caught our attention.
Yeah, we're talking substantial cuts from federal budgets, but also this major restructuring within the agency itself.
These aren't just minor tweaks, are they?
No, not at all. The scale suggests something more fundamental is changing in how the government views supporting small businesses.
And that's exactly what we want to dive into today. For you, the learner, listening in, our goal is simple. Get a clear picture of what these cuts actually mean.
Yeah, what are the potential ripple effects for small businesses, but, without getting totally bogged down in jargon or complexity?
Right. We want to give you the crucial info, straight up.
And to help us sort of unpack all this, we're drawing on some insights from Chris Lehnes. He's a factoring specialist who's been watching this space closely.
Okay, great. So let's start with the reorganization piece. Early 2025, the SBA kicked off what it called a sweeping reorganization initiative. What was the thinking there?
Well, the stated goals were boosting efficiency and aligning operations more tightly with their, let's say, core missions, disaster response, and access to capital.
Streamlining, basically.
This was the idea. Streamline the internal workings.
But this streamlining, it involves some really dramatic changes on the ground, didn't it? Like a 43% staff reduction.
That's a huge number.
And moving services away from central offices towards regional and field offices? Decentralization.
It's a massive shift in how they operate, yes. A substantial personnel decrease centrally, and pushing service delivery more local.
Okay, so the SBA's rationale, the story they told, was about efficiency gains and getting rid of redundant positions, particularly ones created during the pandemic response.
Right. And, I mean, on the surface, that makes some sense. The pandemic definitely led to a rapid, maybe temporary expansion in some areas.
So reevaluating staffing isn't totally out of left field.
Not entirely. But it's the sheer scale, nearly half the workforce, that's raising eyebrows and, frankly, concerns among stakeholders.
Because, even if leadership says essential services won't be affected, it's hard to see how cutting that many people doesn't have an impact.
That's the core question, isn't it? Can a much smaller team really handle the diverse, often urgent needs of so many small businesses across the whole country?
Especially when personalized support often needs, well, people, experienced people.
Exactly. And Lehnes points to some worrying potential consequences, things like slower loan processing times.
Which can be absolutely critical for a small business, life or death sometimes.
Definitely. And also fewer outreach initiatives. How important is that outreach piece normally?
Oh, it's vital, especially for reaching entrepreneurs who aren't already plugged into existing networks, maybe in underserved communities. Fewer outreach efforts mean fewer connections.
Fewer workshops, maybe fewer partnerships with local groups.
Precisely, that on-the-ground work. And then there's the mentorship aspect. He mentions a diminished ability to provide personalized guidance and mentorship.
Yeah, and that's something you can't easily automate, right? That human touch, tailored advice based on experience?
Not effectively, no. Cutting staff directly limits their capacity for that crucial one-on-one support. Okay, so that's the internal shakeup. But alongside that, we're also seeing these deep funding cuts in recent federal budget proposals. And they're hitting key programs.
Right. Let's look at those. First, entrepreneurial development programs seem to be facing major reductions.
What kind of programs fall under that umbrella?
These are the ones really designed to, nurture entrepreneurs, give them the knowledge, the resources, the support systems to start and grow, foundational stuff.
And specific examples like women's business centers, veteran business outreach centers, SCORE, mentorship networks. These are well-known resources.
Very well-known and heavily relied upon. They offer targeted support, business education, help refining plans, crucial connections to mentors.
So if their funding gets slashed, what's the real-world impact on someone trying to start up or scale up?
Well, the most direct impact is just less service. Fewer resources mean they likely have to scale back, maybe reach fewer people.
Could even mean closing locations in some areas?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Which limits access, especially for those who need that support the most.
Okay, next up, Cuts affecting access to capital in underserved areas. This feels really important for economic equity.
It is crucial. This involves funding cuts for community development financial institutions, CDFIs.
Ah, CDFIs.
Yeah, these are spiralized lenders. Their whole mission is getting capital to minority-owned businesses, startups, entrepreneurs in poorer areas who often struggle with traditional banks.
So they fill a really critical gap.
A vital gap. So when their funding gets cut,
it slows down business development in those exact communities that need it most.
that's the likely outcome. Fewer opportunities, potentially making economic disparities even wider.
And then there's the impact on rural America, cuts to rural development programs, which often used to connect with the USDA.
Yes, rural businesses face their own unique hurdles. Infrastructure, market access. These programs supported things like broadband expansion.
Which is just essential these days, right? To compete at all.
Absolutely. And also things like renewable energy improvements, which can really help lower operating costs.
So these aren't just abstract programs, they're tangible things. Better internet, lower energy bills.
Real things that make a difference. And when that support gets reduced,
it gets harder for rural entrepreneurs to compete with urban businesses. They face disadvantages, slower internet, higher costs.
it could really deepen the economic struggles in many rural areas.
Okay, looking at budgets is one thing, but Linz also brings in some real-world stories. Let's talk about Jacob Thomas, the farmer in Kansas.
Yeah, his situation really highlights the impact. There were federal programs that used to buy produce directly from small farms like his.
Providing a reliable income stream.
Exactly. That program got eliminated, and it led directly to a 10% drop in his revenue.
Wow, 10%. That's huge for a small farm.
It puts the whole operation's viability at risk, a direct hit.
And it's not just farmers, right? Small manufacturers, food producers in rural areas too.
That's right. Many of them made investments, say, in energy-efficient equipment, counting on government rebates or support that was promised.
To make the numbers work.
Right. And now those programs are suddenly on hold or scaled way back. So they're stuck with unexpected costs.
It's like the rug got pulled out from under them after they'd already committed.
Pretty much. It leaves them in a really tough spot financially.
And going back to underserved communities trying to get capital, we mentioned CDFIs, but what's the experience like now on the ground?
Well, with less funding and fewer staff at both the SBA and the CDFIs, it's just getting harder to secure that capital.
More hurdles, longer waits.
Exactly. Many rely heavily on those CDFI loans or SBA microloans. Fewer resources means delays, maybe applications don't get processed, business plans get stalled or even abandoned.
Which just stifles growth where it's arguably needed most.
It really does.
Now, unsurprisingly, these changes haven't gone unnoticed in D.C. You mentioned political responses and public pushback. Is this coming from both sides of the aisle?
It seems so, yes. Lawmakers from different viewpoints are voicing concern about the potential fallout from cutting SBA resources. There's a general understanding, I think, that small businesses are just crucial job creators.
And that argument that cutting support is short-sighted because small businesses generate, 2/3 of net new jobs?
Yeah.
That's a powerful point.
It really is. It frames investment in small business not just as helping individuals, but as boosting the whole economy. Cutting back could really hurt overall growth.
There's also this worry, maybe looming larger now, about disaster response. The SBA's role there has been so vital in the past.
Absolutely critical. Hurricanes, wildfires, the pandemic. The SBA stepped in with emergency funds, guidance.
And with a smaller workforce, fewer resources, could they respond as quickly or effectively next time?
That's a major concern. It could leave vulnerable businesses hanging when they need help the most.
But it sounds like it's not all negative. There is some pushback, maybe some talk of targeted reinvestment.
Yes, that's a more hopeful note. Some legislators are pushing to reinvest in programs with proven success, especially those supporting women, veterans, and minority entrepreneurs.
Focusing on what works, basically.
A more strategic approach, perhaps, recognizing the specific needs and track records of certain programs.
So looking ahead, what does this road ahead look like for the SBA and, more importantly, for small business owners trying to navigate all this?
Well, uncertain is probably the key word. It really means business owners need to be more proactive in seeking out alternative support systems.
Like what? Community organizations, local chambers of commerce.
Exactly. State-level agencies, too. Looking beyond the federal SBA for resources and advice.
And it sounds like being more self-reliant is going to be key.
Yes, definitely. Using digital tools, leveraging private networks for mentorship, financing, business development. that's likely to become even more critical.
But you also mentioned, based on Lehnes' point, that access to those alternatives isn't equal, right?
That's a really crucial caveat. Not everyone has the same access to strong networks or digital tools. So this shift could actually widen the gap between the well-connected and the more marginalized entrepreneurs.
A serious potential side effect.
Indeed. And partly in response, you're seeing small business advocacy groups really mobilizing.
Pushing back.
Pushing for policy reversals, for increased investment. They're framing it not just economically, but as a matter of social equity and national resilience.
Okay, so let's try to boil this down. For you, listening, what are the main takeaways about the SBA's impact right now?
I think the core thing is, the SBA has historically been this foundational support for entrepreneurs, a real pillar.
Right.
But these recent changes, the restructuring, the funding cuts, they're definitely creating ripples. And those ripples threaten to destabilize small businesses, especially the ones that are already most vulnerable.
So the long-term effects are still unclear. Depends on how things play out.
Exactly. It depends on the response from government, the private sector, local communities.
Yeah.
A lot of moving parts.
But the bottom line for small businesses is adapt.
It seems they're facing a new reality, absolutely. One that demands adaptability, advocacy, and innovation just to navigate successfully.
It's definitely complex, isn't it? So many interconnected pieces really shows how tied small business success is to broader policies.
It really does. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Given this changing landscape, what kind of innovative solutions might pop up? Maybe from within the business community itself or the private sector to fill these gaps.
That's interesting.
And maybe more personally for individual entrepreneurs listening. How can you best prepare? How do you build resilience into your business facing these kinds of shifts? Something to think about.